rot and mold, decay can tell a story. This is something that I've been thinking about for the past few months after I came across a curious archive video talking about the world building type of moldy worlds. This is in opposition to you being directly spoon-fed all this information through text and obvious cues, and instead you're going to be experiencing this world, and through the rot and through the mold you're going to get the history of where you're at. We're going to tie that thought to Occult Crescent in a moment here, but tomorrow morning we're going to be hearing from the developers exactly how they plan to address Occult Crescent feedback and what their plans for the future of the content are. Occult Crescent, while it does have flaws that I absolutely have brought up, it's also an amazing form of content in many ways. When I take 2 steps back and then I take a forest versus the trees view of Occult Crescent, I can see a lot of things that the developers have heard over the years that I know the community has raised that have been addressed in this form of content. From this point on in this video, we're going to be talking about the talking points. There's going to be timestamps for each. As you were doing Dawn Trail, how many times did you have NPCs repeat the exact same information that you just heard a minute or 2 ago? And then again and again. This was very fair criticism, in my opinion, raised against Dawn Trail's storyline, where it basically treated us like idiots. When I look at Occult Crescent, and I am a kind of person where I do focus on the details, I focus on the trees rather than the forest, but I take a step back and I look at the forest, I think to myself, hey, this is the developers listening to that feedback that we said about stop spoon-feeding us the same information over and over again, treating us like we're fools. Instead, please give us a storyline that could explain itself, that could be rather actions or the world itself that you're experiencing telling us this story. And then I think, hey, that's like that one video from Curious Archive about moldy world building that I saw, where rather than explicitly tell you what happened in that part of Elden Ring, instead you're going to go to that map in Elden Ring and you're going to like experience it and see it. The visuals, the aesthetic is going to tell you, hey, this at one point was a giant cathedral, now look at it knocked down, look at the spores, look at all the mold, look at this, it's just overgrown. That is a very powerful type of storytelling, and if I'm honest, that's my own personal favorite, although everyone's going to have their own choice. That ties brilliantly in with the second point I'm going to make, is that for over a decade we've heard about the quote-unquote white mage city of Amdapor and the quote-unquote black mage city of Mhach, such as through content like the Lance Raid Weeping City of Mhach, or from the dungeons the Lost City of Amdapor, which to this day remains one of my favorite dungeons aesthetically. I absolutely think that this rotting world decay thing, I know I have a theme for this video, but it's probably because I actually think that theme is very powerful. But you go through there, and then you see this city of Amdapor just covered in mold, and then you go deeper, and then you see how Diabolos is at the end of that dungeon, who is super hot for the record, and it's just, that dungeon in and of itself tells you a lot about what happened to Amdapor. Like, you're getting the storytelling, you're getting the world building through that. Or going back to the Alliance raids, through the map, you're really seeing what the hell is this Ozma thing? Whoa, what is this giant flying structure that we're in? Wait, the Void Scent took over here. Look at all these coffins, look at these great statues of these black mages. It was incredibly captivating, to say the least. And so I would be a liar if I told you anything but, hey, I wanted to know more of it, and I still do to this day. And that's one thing that Occult Crescent is touching on, is these massive city-states that we have had pieces of information scoured throughout the years, and I am incredibly compelled to learn more. I'll leave that topic because we need to get through more points in this video very quickly, and then so we're going to talk about Phantom Jobs next. Phantom Jobs is a system that I think is a severe upgrade from anything that we've had before. Eureka's elemental wheel system is not that compelling to me, if I'm quite honest. What made the content compelling back in Stormblood is probably because Scholar simply didn't spam Broil, which I am, to be quite honest, very sick of it. But Stormblood Scholar had all these different effects to juggle. Less than we had in Realm Reborn, notably less, but we had something that made the moment-to-moment gameplay more interesting. And so when I look back at Eureka, the systems were less refined than what we have today, but the base core class, the lens through which you experience the world, is the job that you pick in the game. That lens is really kind of busted and blurry. But if we look at Phantom Jobs as a system, it's basically subclasses. And that is an incredibly compelling archetype to me. I think that it's also a very compelling archetype to many people based on what I was hearing and the hype around Phantom Jobs, because don't think that I'm forgetting those months and months and months of theory crafting and hype that were all around. I didn't do many of those videos because I didn't want to fall into the hype trap, but my god, people were raving about it. And so that's the thing about Phantom Jobs. It is better system. It is incredibly compelling. And that's why I suppose when I raise the criticism I do, that's why I'm a little bit more scathing than people would want me to be. Ranger's 2-minute buff, I'm not going to apologize for saying, why is the 2-minute meta in a Phantom Job? Are we not trying to do new things? Why are we not using this content to experiment with gameplay systems and play styles that we don't have in current Final Fantasy XIV, and seeing how it engages with players? Because Occult Crescent, and this is me getting ahead of myself a little, but Occult Crescent tests many different layers of the content. We have the fates, we have the critical engagements, we have the Forked Tower, and we obviously also have open world mobs, and so it's very disappointing to see that this amazing testing chamber just isn't being used. And so when I'm more scathing in my feedback about Phantom Jobs, it's not because I think that they're dumb. Quite the opposite. I think that it is brilliant. I think it is fantastic. Through the life cycle of this game, we've experienced many different systems where you could pick and choose different abilities, and to me, could I see a subclassing system coming to Final Fantasy XIV in patch 8.0? I actually could. And why I say this is because when I went to the media tour, the developers made it resoundingly clear that 7.0 was the content difficulty and rewards for the content revamp, and that the 8.0 was going to be more on job identity and focused on that, and they didn't want to combine the two just in case they would overwhelm players. I was sitting there absolutely enthralled, and this was, I suppose, at this point a year ago, and it was such a fantastic opportunity that I'm so grateful for. But now that I look at the Phantom Jobs, I think, oh god, we need to give feedback now. And if you love something, you give criticism to it. So I'm going to cap this off by saying the Phantom Job system, the idea of it is fantastic. We just need the developers to use this amazing experimental test ground to its fullest potential. And why is that? Because I don't want to be spamming fucking Broil in 8.0 on Scholar. Please, God help me. Please give me my pets and my dots back. That is my shit, and the game has purged it from it. Please, I'm begging you. What would be cool would be, say there was like a summoner subclass that would allow you to have like a pet on like Scholar, and I don't think that this in particular would happen, but I think that that would be absolutely amazing. Really, when I look at Final Fantasy XI, which is like, what, over 2 decades old at this point, I think that it had a really compelling subclass system, and that I think that there's no reason 20 years later that we don't have the technology. The question at this point is, do the developers have the drive, the ambition, the desire to make it happen? And I really hope they do. From that, the next thing that Occult Crescent really did well is that the content is obviously casual, it's approachable, but it does have bite to it. And again, if you're expecting DSR level mechanics from a critical engagement, I think that you're a little out of touch. But for casual content, it absolutely has bite. Such as the command pot. That's quite something. The next thing I'll say is something that I actually have heard people say is a negative, and I could not possibly disagree with them more. Content pacing in Occult Crescent is very quick. And this is great because this means that you can leave and join at whatever time you want. There's no worry about, hey, what if I go to the bathroom? Am I going to miss this NM? I joined this NM train, but hey, as these people are knocking out these mobs making it spawn, am I going to miss it? Stuff like that. You don't need to worry about it because it is so quick. And again, am I saying that it's perfect? No, but this is speaking on strengths of it, and I do believe that this is a strength of the content. You don't need to worry about missing out. The next thing is something I have unfortunately not been able to experience yet, but which is a negative because Portal Snipers, Discord Prog, etc. Don't think I'm ignoring that. But Forked Tower, because I have watched videos on it, looks absolutely amazing. They've brought in some cool boss fights. Like, I'm such a love of like water and ice themes, absolutely adore them, and this ice water dragon is one of the coolest things I've seen. And so I think Fork Tower in and of itself is such an amazing addition to the game. I always think that this kind of thing should be added. Only real issue that I have with the type of content, we're not talking about the queuing system, is that we don't have a normal mode of this, and I think that that is actually such a unfortunate loss. There's other issues, obviously, like I don't think that we should have lost actions, phantom job actions that are just dedicated to Fork Tower content. I think that that is really, really, really capping us at the knees for what we could explore with phantom jobs. It's honestly kind of boring. I also think from the videos I've seen in Fork Tower, so I've seen what it does, that we should have explored more things, like everyone needing to split off. If you remember Castrum Lacus Latori, everyone would have to split off into different sections to save the prisoners, and if you saved all of them, you get a better reward. That's incredibly compelling, and I want to see that kind of thing not only return, but to be further explored. And obviously the potential's there for that to happen, and so I do rate that as a positive. It's just we need to harness that positive. I'm gonna say something here that's obviously subjective, but I think that the world of Occult Crescent is very, very, very beautiful. I think that it is a visually stunning zone, especially when you do see things like Amdapor, when you see things like Mhach, when you see things in there like the ruins, and then you're exploring deeper and deeper. It really is a zone that I do want to be in. It's very, very gorgeous. Another element of Occult Crescent I will compliment is the treasure chests, and I think that they should tone them down, and I think that they, like how many there are on the map in total, I think that it should be actually like whoa kind of thing. I also think that they should be based off of each individual player, and I think that their location should change. I think that would make it a lot more engaging. And other things, like I think that the loot table should be shifted, and ideally, and again, this could be too idealistic because I do know it takes dev time, it's going to have completely novel loot in these treasure chests. While I do think it's great to see things like the Urican Petrol Horn, for example, come back, I think we could have done better here in terms of the rewards and made them something unique. And again, that's keeping in mind that these are going to be much harder to find. The location that you find one, you can't just spam it in the shout chat, and just overall making it random, like making it an actual joy to come across one of these. Now, like just a burst of dopamine. Now people will be like, whoa, that's a whole lot of criticism. This is a positivity video. The thing is, the system of having those silver chests is actually really smart. But the problem with them is that we mapped them out instantly. I made a video on it, and now you just know exactly where to go every time. I think that we could make the system, which is great system, I think it should stay, we could make it so much more engaging. I'm gonna say something that might be a little controversial, because is it perfect? No. Do I think that the 1v1 me bros should come back? Absolutely. Boja had them. They were so compelling. So compelling. I absolutely love them. As well as I do believe that there should be more content types explored, such as Guild Wars 2 has this quote-unquote living world idea. How cool would it be to see a living world that as you're doing things, particular maps or buildings and things are changing, maybe you have something like you're building a fort to try and fend off like all these voids sent that have been like sent from like the city of Mhach or something like that. We could really have something quite stunning. And I say this speaking as someone who is starting to inch a little bit more into Guild Wars 2. It is actually really cool to see the world change to what you're doing. I think that we could do that in Occult Crescent, so don't think that what I'm about to say omits any of that. However, Occult Crescent feels really good in that it doesn't just have fates and a very quick pace of fates. To anyone who farmed some of those demi-atmas like I did, we all know that the pace of fates isn't that quick, and so I cycle back to one of my previous points I made, which is the pacing of the content is really good in Occult Crescent, whereas the pacing of Overworld really kind of sucks. And so, sorry, I'm getting to my next point I'm going to make after this one. Spoiler alert. But, I like the fact that the Overworld in Occult Crescent has so many different things you can do, like the treasure chests, you have the critical engagements, you have the fates. This kind of idea should not only be taken into the overworld, and yeah, I mean general maps. I mean, like, as you are out there in, say, like, I don't even know which to use. Like, say you're in Heritage Found, like, just a random example. Heritage Found should have critical engagements, and it should have, like, that living world. Like, take inspiration from Guild Wars 2, that's have living world since its inception, like, a decade ago. And it's like, you could take all of these treasure chests and all this content and all these ideas from Occult Crescent and apply it to the overworld, and I think that that would be so much more captivating. Like, if I'm in Heritage Found, giving me this would be amazing. There's so much more that I could go into that I really like about Occult Crescent, but that would get into, like, micro little details. Like, I really love the seaside village, but I love the ocean, I love seaside villages. I desperately hope that one day I can move to one. That's why I really hope for San Diego, but, like, my point of this video is Occult Crescent isn't unsalvageable. Do the developers have a lot of things with it that I think that they should change to make it better? Yeah, I do. I've raised the criticism with the content because, frankly, I'm excited for this kind of content. It's casual, it's easy. I get off of work, I'm stressed, I just don't want to, like, do all this thinking and planning and party finder to get into a savage raid just to have someone, like, wipe the raid and just the toxicity and stuff like that. And I mean, party finders hasn't been as toxic as people say. Let me cycle back on that. But when I get off of work and I just want a chill day, I just want a chill day. It's not that deep. It just is not. And Occult Crescent can deliver that. And so I think that Occult Crescent is far from over. And so that's my thoughts before we even hear what the developers' plans are. Occult Crescent is far from over.